For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates. This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi. Our guest tonight is Vice Admiral M.S. Pawar, former Deputy Chief of Naval Staff. Admiral Pawar, welcome to StratNews Global, sir. Thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure to be on your show, Amitabh.
Pleasure's all ours, Admiral. We're just looking at, the news peg is, of course, May is when the Chinese incursions, the skirmishes started in Ladakh and then snowballed into deadly clashes. It's been 2 years since then. Everyone in the public kind of knows about what the army is doing, or even to a certain extent the Air Force. But the Navy, it's not really so much of public knowledge. Just wanted your takes on, since you were so involved in this and many other issues, on the Indian Navy's role. Even the Raksha Mantri, I think last year, about June, talked about the proactive forward deployment, which was signaling India's intent deployment on eastern, western seaboards, and even in the South China Sea.
Even before I answer that question, Amitabh, I must place on record the Indian Navy's appreciation of our comrades in arms in the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force. And through your channel, I would like to tell you that the Navy, being a silent service, is normally not in the headlines. But the Navy's role in that crisis is the one which will do the nation proud. I can say with confidence because I was there myself. If you look at the circumstances immediately before the Chinese incursions, the Indian Navy was already extremely stretched. We were operating in support of the national evacuation mission as a part of Vande Bharat, and we had launched Operation Samudra Setu to evacuate our people from Maldives and from the Persian Gulf countries. And there was a time when even leading navies like the United States Navy, you will recall that their aircraft carrier USS Roosevelt had to pull into Guam. The commanding officer was sacked. The Secretary of the Navy later resigned. And the world was tackling this pandemic. And navies, the way they are structured, the ships, the way they are, their ventilation systems on board in confined spaces pose tremendous amount of challenges. And under those circumstances, the Indian Navy took a daring call to evacuate our citizens, beleaguered citizens from across the seas. And we were already having our hands full. But as soon as the crisis in the Himalayas erupted, I must again place it on record that we had the 3 service chiefs, course mates from the National Defense Academy. It added greater synergy, a greater amount of coordination. Not that our structures are not robust in case they are not course mates. But once again, we have the same situation today, wherein we have 3 course mates in command of their respective 3 services. And that adds a great amount of understanding to each other's perspectives and helping each other. As far as the crisis per se is concerned, the Indian Navy's role was very clear-cut for us. Notwithstanding our operational stretch in Samudra Setu, we had to keep an eye on the Chinese forces, naval forces in the Indian Ocean region, the forces that are likely to be joining the existing forces through the eastern choke points. We just had the 34th Anti-Piracy Escort Force, which had vacated the Indian Ocean region on the 4th of June. And per se, when the Galwan crisis occurred, we had just the 35th Anti-Piracy Escort Force. And throughout the crisis period, the 35th APEF was on a crosshairs. The Chinese understood it very well. That's what deterrence is all about, the adversary understanding that you could punish him should he decide to escalate matters. And the message went home very, very bluntly as well as effectively. And I must tell you, for the first time, perhaps now, the nation can know that on more than one occasion, we got feelers that the Indian Navy requires to be reined in. But the directives to us from the government were very clear. We had a free hand And should the adversary not get a message and tries to escalate in the maritime domain, they would have come to grief. You also mentioned about the South China Sea. Well, I would like to tell you that the Indian Navy goes where the nation's maritime interests lie, and no ocean is out of bounds for us. We did operate in the South China Sea, and should there be a requirement, we will continue to do so again. That's a no-brainer.
Talking about those requirements, Admiral, I mean, we saw pictures earlier during the presidential fleet review this year as well of the P-8Is, the MiG-29s. They were apparently also deployed along the LAC. I mean, we know their role in the seas. The P-8 now, I think there's one in La Réunion with the French there exercising. Before that in Australia. So if you could talk about the capabilities of these machines.
Well, I mean, the P-8I, I mean, it's a Boeing platform. It's a strategic asset in a way. And though the Navy operates it, these are actually national assets. And the P-8I once again goes wherever there's a requirement, be it in the Southern Indian Ocean. When in 2018 we did the daring rescue of Commander Abhilash Tommy, who was marooned in South Indian Ocean, flying from the Sivsagar Sivsagar Ram Ghulam International Airport in Mauritius, and directing the French fishing vessel FV Osiris to evacuate Abhilash Tommy, or operating from Hawaii, or operating from Guam, or Reunion, or Australia. Uh, these are our normal operating areas where we exercise with our friendly foreign partners, but also in support of our Army and the Air Force. If there is a requirement, we fly them over land. I must hasten to add that the Indian Air Force is quite capable to meet the needs of the Indian Army. But in the true spirit of jointmanship, if there is a requirement, the P-8I flies on land, and it's a very potent platform with all its world-class payloads, the electro-optical, the radar, the electronic warfare suits, the heights at which it can fly, the kind of onboard processing that it's got, and perhaps some of the best trained tactical operators and pilots that we have got. These aircraft fly wherever there's a requirement. And you will be happy to know that we have got 12 of them now, a sizable number.
True. We're seeing those pictures of the LRMR squadron. Admiral, again, now the Sea Guardians have enhanced the Indian Navy and Indian military's overall capabilities. If you'd like to elaborate on that.
Sea Guardians, I mean, this is a success story, I would say. And the government of India gave us emergency powers as soon as the Galwan crisis was brewing up. It is a record time that the Indian Navy, in just a matter of 37 days, was able to acquire these two Sea Guardians, and they were on task on the 38th day. They have been true force multipliers. They can fly for 30 hours non-stop. They are controlled from shore, so therefore you don't have the challenge of fatigue, so to say, and the maintenance costs are minuscule compared to the manned flights. They are a real force multiplier. They can fly across our entire swath of the area of responsibility, from the eastern choke points of Sunda, Lombok, and Malacca, of course, to the western waters right up to Babal Mandeb. And they can provide a sizable amount of time on task. They are well integrated and linked through data links with our surface platforms, through other P-8Is, and the picture that the Sea Guardian can see is available to the fleet at large. So they have been a true force multiplier, and it has been a success story, I would say, the Sea Guardians.
Right. From Galwan, Admiral, if I can get your response to something more recent, which is Xi Jinping's GSI, the Global Security Initiative. Now, what does that indicate to you? I mean, is it Chinese activity on security alliances in response to one, of course, the US, Quad, the AUKUS? Or how do you see this Chinese reaction?
I'm surprised you got taken in by the GSI, as the Chinese call it.
I have got taken in. I just wanted your response.
My response is very straight, and I always maintain that. This is all, I wouldn't say fraudulent, because it will be a very harsh term to use, but absolutely hypocritical noises, coining new terminologies and abbreviations which have no real meaning. The Global Security Initiative is supposed to be a counter to the Quad and other alliances, so to say, to enhance security in the Indo-Pacific, or as the Chinese call it, the Asia-Pacific. Now, if you look at why I call it hypocritical, is because all the terminologies and adjectives used in that GSI announcement are actually very hollow, because the main source of insecurity in the Asia Pacific is actually China and its irredentist or expansionist attitudes. If you take out the crisis in the South China Sea, for example, all the jostling about ownership of the islands in the South China Sea, be it the Paracels, be it the Spratlys, be it the Natuna Islands, the common player in all this is China. And everybody is actually trying to convince China that they also share the ownership of some of these islands. So also you look at the Himalayan landscape, it is a Chinese unilateralism to change the status quo that has caused a tremendous amount of ill will and instability in the Himalayas. So when the Chinese talk about providing security against whom? I mean, everybody is crying for security from China in the Western Pacific. So the Chinese say one thing and do quite the another. It is a part of their strategy. They believe in Sun Tzu, whose tagline was deception. As the Chinese say, sound drums in the east and attack in the west. The entire Sun Tzu's philosophy is about deception, telling lies, making others believe what they are not supposed to believe. You saw in yesteryears Deng Xiaoping, the paramount leader, advising the Chinese to hide their capabilities, not to take the lead, and to bide their time. That was in a way, a deceptive way to let the world believe that the Chinese mean good to all. But after the coming of the President Xi Jinping, these guards have been let down and their true face is coming out. So the Global Security Initiative is nothing but a facade, and nobody takes them seriously, actually speaking. At least the leading navies or the ASEAN nations or the other people who are party to the conflicts in the South China Sea, not least India, of course.
Admiral, earlier you said the Chinese message to India was to rein in the Indian Navy because of the message that was being sent across. But this is not something new. I mean, even in the recent past, whether you look at Pulwama, Balakot, there was forced deployment by the Indian Navy for whatever reason, deterrent on the eastern seaboard, on the western seaboard, wherever required, right?
That's true, because the Indian Navy is always ready, and as you would be aware, any Indian naval ship or any submarine or any platform at sea is always combat ready. And irrespective of what mission they may be deployed on at a particular time, they can quickly change posture to the primary job of combat. Ships, I will take you back to Operation Cactus. INS Godavari, returning from a goodwill visit to Australia, was on a routine passage back home, but suddenly she was diverted to Maldives when there is a crisis there, and she did a wonderful job. That's because all our ships are loaded with combat ordnance whenever they are put to sea. Post Balakot, of course, it was once again a very heartening manner in which the Indian Navy changed its posture from the tropics annual exercise, which was in progress with both the fleets who were exercising in full strength in the Indian Ocean region, both on the eastern seaboard and western seaboard. And as soon as there was a requirement and the tensions were higher, the Indian Navy redeployed. If you recall, even before the Indian Navy's strength per se bore onto the Northern Arabian Sea, we had INS Trikhand, which was deployed in the anti-piracy patrols, fully combat ready. She was moved up. I will not get into the tactical details, but even if you look at INS Prabal class ship, which had been deployed to the Persian Gulf for the IDEX in Abu Dhabi, that platform, though small in size, was combat ready, and it helped tie down as many as 3 to 4 Pakistani units. But once again, it was the posturing of the Indian Navy. Nobody messes around with the Indian Navy ship, because As I told you, there is deterrence by denial as well as deterrence by punishment. And should we mess around with the Indian Navy's platform, wherever, be it in South China Sea, be it in the North Arabian Sea, the punishment will be harsh, immediate, and unbearable. So that's the reason. In fact, I will take you back to Kargil crisis.
Hmm.
Not
Hmm.
is now
Yep.
more than 20 years old. But if you look at the Jane's fighting ships, that famous publication from the United Kingdom, and the editorial of that book in 2000, it clearly mentions that the Indian Navy's posturing in the Northern Arabian Sea helped hasten end the conflict. But Pakistanis then got the message, and Pakistanis got the message post Balakot too. Even as the Galwan crisis was unfolding, if you look at the abrogation of Article 370, purely an internal matter of the Indian Republic, there were more noises being made from our Western neighbor about going nuclear and such hollow talk. Even amateurs won't use such terminology. But the Indian Navy dared to stare both the adversaries in the face. Our postures, our poise was not lost on the adversaries, and they were forced to reconcile to the fact that the Indian Navy is in full combat readiness.
Right. Admiral, again, earlier you were talking about the differences in the PLAN and the Indian Navy philosophies, where the Chinese look at deception a lot. How would you compare, say, the skill sets, the financial wherewithal that the Chinese have, the capabilities, vessel building, which is going on at such rapid speed in China?
Well, I would like to compliment the Chinese, the rapidity with which they are building a navy. Perhaps the Chinese have built in last 10 years equivalent to an Indian navy and more. What we have built in 75 years. That is a testimony of their shipbuilding capability, their economy, their political will, ability of finances to fund their shipbuilding program. But let it be not lost on anybody, on your viewers. The Chinese are building a navy to challenge the United States Navy, be it their carrier building program. We are a sideshow as far as they're concerned. But let me also assure you and your viewers that nature has given us tremendous amount of advantage by means of our peninsular
Geography.
geography. The location at which we are located gives us tremendous amount of advantages. And we may not have the numbers of the Chinese, but our outlying island territories, be it the Lakshadweep and Nicobar island groups or the Andaman groups of islands, which sit astride very busy international sea lanes of communication, which perforce have to be used by the Chinese and world at large for the shipping, because the shippers take the most economical, shortest routes. Time for them is money, and they would not like to divert. And fortunately for us, our island territories, our peninsular geography is at a very commanding position, and therefore we can exploit these, and we can challenge the Chinese in our area of interest. And we always give battle. Any general, as in the army, chooses a very favorable ground to give battle. So also the Indian Navy, notwithstanding our global reach, we will choose where to fight, how to fight, what territories to use. You talked about the crew skill sets, and you also earlier mentioned about our PATI being in the Reunion Islands. If you look at the number of countries, navies we exercise with, perhaps we would be after the United States Navy, we would be the one which exercises with the maximum number of navies in the world. And it's not for no reason, because we benefit tremendously. Other navies benefit tremendously. Other navies seek to exercise with us because they accept and acknowledge our superior skill sets. They gain a lot, and that's why they exercise with us. As far as the Chinese Navy is concerned, they may have the money, they may have the hardware, but even when I retired, in my retirement message, I said that I was very proud to be the deputy chief of the most professional navy in the world. They are not hollow words. Given our constraints, our finances, our resources that we have got, we get the maximum bang for the buck. Our people are world class, notch above the rest. The Chinese, on the other hand, are conscripts, so to say the least. At least 35 to 40% of their people are conscripts. Whereas if you look at the recruitment rallies, there is, my to join the Indian Navy. We even for 10th class pass people to join our, which is the minimum qualification to join the Navy, some branches, we get 12th class people and even graduates with 80% and above. We are a very professional Navy. Our crew sets are acknowledged by the world. We also train a large number of friendly foreign navies, both in operational sea training as well as in our training establishments. Tens of thousands of foreign naval personnel we have trained. We continue to do so, and gratis, most of it. And that's where we do the capacity building and the capability enhancement of our neighbors in consonance with Prime Minister's mantra of Sagar, which is security and growth for all in the region. So we are a world-class human resource. No questions asked about it. Just to digress, you would have seen a couple of days back USS George Washington having had certain spate of suicides because of living conditions. I mean, look at our men. Our ships, when they go into refit, our crews live under extremely challenging circumstances, without air conditioning, without toilets. But have you ever heard of misconduct or discipline issues or low morale on account of living conditions? Far from it. Our people are very adaptable, and that's where our leadership, the officers, the senior sailors who form a very crucial bridge between the ships companies, they help maintain high morale. And when Napoleon said that in any war, 75% of success is dependent upon the morale, and only 25% is attributable to technology. Give a monkey the most advanced technology is of no use. Give a well-trained Indian naval guy even basic technology, we will come out winners.
You mentioned the islands, Admiral. If you want to just talk more about the Andaman Nicobar Islands, the Lakshadweep, the synergy between the three arms of our military services, it's been called, unsinkable aircraft carriers, island geography.
Well, I mean, long before anyone called them, I would like to take you back to a gentleman called Veer Savarkar, who is pretty defamed on a matter of great political differences. But in his book, seminal book, Maji Janmatep in Marathi, he has called it the Gibraltar of the East, the Andamans. And the Chinese have done us a great favor, actually, by needling us in the Himalayas. They opened our eyes. We knew it was coming when George Fernandez, many decades ago, talked about the greater contest going to be in the Himalayas. We see it all coming true now. The point is that we have got the Andaman and Nicobar Command, now a full-fledged command to look after the security of our eastern islands. And the Chinese did a good thing. They prodded us, and now today, hitherto we had not actually fully armed the islands. Today we have got new generation BrahMos missiles keeping the Chinese at bay. And the entire traffic from the Malacca straits, or that entire slog, is under the command of the Indian Air Force, maritime strike squadrons operating from Car Nicobar, our airfields at the southern group of islands, which help us fly our unmanned aircraft, our Dorniers, our BrahMos batteries, and of course the naval component, which comprises of a large number of ships which are available on petrol, our fueling facilities at Campbell Bay. And this is just the beginning. The Chinese have actually prodded us and pushed us to arm the islands, so to say. And just as the Chinese have developed military infrastructure on the islands that they do not own, actually, which are contested in the South China Sea, we are now going ahead and developing infrastructure, just as we are doing in the Himalayas, on our island territories also. So also on the western flank, the Lakshadweep and Nicobar Islands, our aircraft routinely fly, and we have got great coordination with the Sri Lankan Navy, the Maldives Coast Guard. We do a number of operations in support of narcotics and illegal activities which take place in those areas, and we have had some great successes. So the islands actually are a springboard, and they also give us a great amount of exclusive economic zone, the continental shelves associated with it, a great amount of economic potential, and therefore the Indian Navy looks at these islands as great strategic assets.
Sure. You mentioned earlier, Admiral, that apart from the US, India was probably the second in terms of its bilateral or multilateral exercises. and that those were not just joyrides; they had a very significant purpose. I mean, Malabar now with Australia has joined for a few years, where they have Milan, you have bilateral exercise with all hues and sizes of navies.
That's right. I mean, we exercise, and all these exercises, I will start from the lowest intensity exercises. We have got joint exclusive economic zone patrols with many of our friendly neighbors. We do this patrols with the Mauritius, for example, Seychelles, including Maldives. And at all times when we do the easier surveillance of those countries, we have an element of their own coast guards or the navies on board our platforms, be it in the on board the aircraft or on board the ships. We also do coordinated patrols with our neighbors, like the Indo patrols with Indonesia, with Myanmar, with Thailand, with our brothers in Bangladesh, with Sri Lanka. As we speak, you would have seen news reports of our ships of the first training squadron engaged in port visits to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. In As you mentioned, our PATI is in reunion at present, undertaking exercises in the Mozambique Channel. So these are the lower end, the patrols and coordinated exercises. But the higher end of the spectrum, like Malabar, the exercise Indra, Varuna, Konkan, Osindex, exercise with the Singapore Navy, with the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force. These are high-level exercises as near to combat as is possible, including weapon firings, anti-submarine, anti-aircraft, missile firings, high-intensity carrier battle group operations, and there is a lot to be gained. One of the biggest takeaways at the tactical level, crew proficiency wise, exchanging best practices apart, at the strategic level, I do not see all these countries which are exercising together ever going to war with each other, because they have built bridges of friendship, operating in harbor, operating at sea. There is a certain amount of trust worthiness. We know the people personally. Often there are occasions to pick up a phone and speak to them. We have got lines, secure lines to deal with many of our partner navies or friendly navies. We have got the IONS construct. We have got the Goa Maritime Conclave. And I may also tell you, we were one of the first countries to share experiences of tackling COVID on board our platforms at sea and in air. And we hosted these things on the IONS website for other navies to learn from our experiences of Samudra Setu. And apart from exercises at sea, there's a fair amount of discussion on a weekly basis. For example, I'm not sure if you are aware, we share weather pictures and give weather updates to many of our less capable maritime neighbors in the Indian Ocean region, because we got the capability, and these countries are very often at the receiving end of natural disaster emanating from the sea. We share weather pictures, we share oceanographic data, we exercise with them, and it's a win-win, I would say. And most of these countries are democracies. We know each other where our governments gel very well. Lastly, I would like to add that these exercises are not directed against any country per se. They are primarily meant to enhance security, enhance confidence, ensure that the sea lanes of communication, which are in the global commons, are open for everybody to use. There is no unilateralism to challenge the rules-based order. All these exercises send out a signal to the world at large, and it's achieving their purpose, because many countries take note of these.
You mentioned sharing hydrographic or weather data. Then there's, of course, the IFC IOR, where there's a huge amount of data that is being shared, and it's getting larger and larger. But since you mentioned Jeddah, Admiral, and considering you were so involved in some of these aspects, I wanted you to just elaborate a little bit on our involvement in, say, the northwestern Indian Ocean region. And when you talk about CTFs, or combined task forces, did this observer status in Bahrain happen post the India-US 2+2? If you could just explain that to us.
Well, I mean,
The reason, is it Pakistan related?
I think it's an excellent question, Amitabh. I must compliment you because this aspect is not often discussed in our strategic fora. You look at the Northwest Indian Ocean region. I mean, we got close to 8 million Indian diaspora resident in those countries, between Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Oman. That region is also a source of great amount of hydrocarbons imports or energy security. Close to about 90 billion US dollars of remittances come to India from those countries by our own migrant workers, our own diaspora there. And therefore, this region, not only because of economic reasons and energy security reasons, but historically also, we share very close bonds. These are predominantly Islamic countries. We have got a large population, and we're actually, brothers, I would say. Though Pakistan very often tries to portray itself in the organization of Islamic countries as a messiah of the Islamic world. Actually, we are no less. We share very close relations with that part of the world. Coming to the maritime dimension per se, unfortunately or fortunately, there is a tremendous amount of instability. Firstly, arising from the Shia-Sunni divide, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the conflict in Yemen, the instability in Somalia, the aspects of seaborne terrorism, narcotics trade, human trafficking. I mean, you name it and you have it there. All the sources of instability which can occur in the maritime domain are prevalent in the Northwest Arabian Sea. And at any time, we have close to 120 odd ships on a daily basis of multiple nations operating in that area. So in a way, this is our own backyard, area of tremendous importance to us. And unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, we were not there in the main security construct, in the combined task forces. One of the reasons could be that our international cooperation with the United States happens with the Pacific Command. Now it's the Indo-Pacific Command, which is based at Hawaii, whereas the Northwest Arabian Sea and the Middle East region comes under the US CENTCOM and the Fifth Fleet, which is operating from Bahrain. That divide, so to say, was very, very vivid and phenomenal divide. The Americans were not very keen that we interact with the NAVCENT hitherto, but the reasoning has now been revealed to them. India requires to be there in this construct, and we already have an observer status in the NAVCENT. Yeah. Our defense attaché in Bahrain is dual-hatted. We now have approval to become a part of the CTF 150. In this small region, we have got CTF 150, 151, 152, and now recently 153, the Combined Task Force, which has recently been started just last month to cater specifically for the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb, and the Gulf of Aden. We have Task Force CTF 152, which caters for the Persian Gulf, north of Hormuz. CTF 150, which is presently commanded by Pakistan Navy, which caters for the maritime security operations in the Northwest Arabian Sea, particularly the seas of Muscat and the south of Hormuz, and off the Makaran coast in the Western Arabian Sea. And we got the CTF 151, which caters for anti-piracy patrols. We, of course, have been a part of the anti-piracy patrol constructs independently since 2008, just as the Chinese have been. And I think India is gaining entry into the CTF 150 or any of the combined task forces will be a shot in the arm for the overall security of the region, because we are next door neighbors. We got the capability. You would be aware that we are already in that area as a part of Operation Sankalp since 2019, and we have escorted a large number of our merchant marine through those unstable waters. And it's not only our own merchant marine. A large percentage of the world seafarers come from India, and whichever flag they are on, if an Indian naval ship is around, they are always reassured that help is at hand for sure should there be a crisis. So I think we are deeply conscious of our responsibilities in that region, and it's a good thing. It's a good initiative. We work very closely with the Ministry of External Affairs. I'm not too sure because all the mission sagas, you just saw the national deputy NSA, Mr. Mistry was in
Yes. Africa.
Mozambique a couple of days back. I mean, the diplomacy is backed by a strong naval force, or that is not that rapprochement or that engagement with Mozambique has not come out of the blue. If you recall, 2019, when the ships of the first training squadron under the command of that Shaura Chakra winner, Captain Varun Singh, was on passage to Durban, and the Indian Navy diverted these ships to the port of Beira
Cyclone.
in Mozambique. For about a week, the Indian naval ships were the only platforms which are providing assistance in that part of the world, and it was not lost onto the Mozambique government. The defense minister himself was present there. That living in this area, the preferred security partner, the help is always at hand from the preferred security partner, which is India. And it's not we. It is something like a sex appeal. It's not we saying that we are very sexy or we are the preferred security partner. It is our friendly foreign neighbors who trust us, who know that we come with help without any strings attached. We are not looking for debt trap diplomacy or ulterior motives. It is pure nirapeksha maitri, as they say, in true to our Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam principles. We have no ulterior motives. So also for the Northwest Arabian Sea and that part of the world wherein we are engaging more deeply just now.
Since you mentioned Mozambique, Admiral, I mean, there'll be a lot of focus on whether it's narcotics or whether it's gun running in that Mozambique channel, and also in the AFPAC region, which the Indian Navy, along with other institutions, will be keeping a close eye and making, big hauls of narcotics.
Well, I mean, we are fortunate that that is not only the Indian Navy, but the whole world is keeping an eye on the AFPAC region, because that is the source of much of the narcotics, which is polluting the populations of the world, youth, and there is a sort of a hash highway. That's the terminology, the infamous, not a very pleasant terminology to be used, which emanates from the Makaran coast. Remember when the narcotics travel from the AFPAC region to the Makaran coast? They are traveling through the territory of Pakistan, largely the Western Pakistan, and a part of course, Iran for that matter, but largely to Pakistan. And from the Makaran coast, the narcotics primarily head westwards to through the Bab el Mandeb to the Suez and to Europe. Therefore, thenceforth, but a large percentage goes to the unstable and weak capacity countries on the east coast of Africa, like Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique in particular. And that's one of the reasons why we have got this combined task forces operating there, and be it the Atlanta by the EU NAVFOR, be it the combined task forces, be it the Indian Navy. The whole world is looking at intercepting this illegal narcotics trade, which in turn, this trade in turn funds terrorism, gun running. You see this narcotics being dropped by unmanned drones across the Punjab border in Kashmir, recently closer home. And therefore, it is very important that Indian Navy does what is doing. We help our less endowed neighbors like Maldives, Sri Lanka. We do joint operations because lately a certain percentage of the narcotics find their way to Maldives and Sri Lanka, not to mention even towards India. And we have had some tremendous successes in coordination with the Narcotics Control Bureau, our intelligence agencies, the Coast Guard, the customs departments. We have had thousands of crores of narcotics being intercepted within our EEZ, outside our EEZ, and of course, there is a great amount of coordination which occurs between our maritime surveillance assets. For example, the Joint Interagency Task Force, which is located in Hawaii, and the one in NavCent in Bahrain, we are one-to-one with them through the IFC IWAR. We have got the international liaison officers in the IFC IWAR. There's a fair amount of information exchange which takes place, and we have successes. But let me tell you, for every successful interception of these consignments, There are some, or perhaps we don't know. There are many that go through, and that's
Sure.
what is concerning. Even greater amount of coordination and effort is required to tackle this menace. But as long as countries like, from where it emanates, the AFPAC region, very often, there is a habit of running with the hare and hunting with the hounds. We saw so much of literature and so much of noise being made about terrorism. How, for example, Pakistan fights terrorism, while at the same time hides Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad. So also when Pakistan talks about doing anti narcotics operations, of course they do. There's no doubt. But where is it emanating from? They would, if they show more political will to curb this menace on land, because narcotics, Amitabh, don't grow in the marine environment. They are not cultivated at sea. They are cultivated in a particular region where there is a political patronage for a variety of reasons. And if there is a political will, the world would be a safer place, I would say.
No, the Indian Ocean region, Admiral, I mean, is so vast. And, whether it's the Indo-Pacific, when you look from the Malacca Straits, you're talking about South China Sea, all the way to the Indian Peninsula, and then further to the east coast of Africa. Is the Indian Navy, considering its relative strength, which is not as big as other navies, is it overstretched in terms of either human resources or the wear and tear that these machines are going through? You mentioned COVID, there's anti-piracy, there are deployments, there are multilateral exercises, there are visits across the globe.
Well, that's a very probing question, I would say. But now that I've retired, I can tell you, yes, of course, we're overstretched. And that's why when I mentioned to you that the Indian Navy gets the best bang for the buck with the limited resources that we have got, the size of the Navy that we have, we bite and chew and digest much more than a comparable Navy of comparable size would be able to handle. And that's one of the reasons when I told you that we have got this, one of the best human resources in the and best leaderships any Navy can boast of, keep the morale high. To just give you an example, if you look at the Indian Navy, right from the time in the last just 3 years, we had the Balakot after the cowardly Pulwama terrorist attacks, and we were stood to, actually. We were stood to, and our posturing, the way our ships were deployed. Soon thereafter, we had in 2019 the abrogation of Article 370, and once again we were stood to throughout that period. Mission Operation Samudra Setu, and then we had Galwan. And at the peak of the southwesterly monsoons, most navies don't dare to operate in the stormy and the mountainous seas that prevalent in the Arabian Sea during the monsoons. But it is to the credit of the Indian Navy that, and more so to our maintainers and our logistics chains, that they kept these platforms going. Monsoon times are normally the times for sort of rest, recuperation, maintenance, catching up with leave and things like that. But the Indian Navy was right there. Our carrier battle group was, running amok, I would say, in the Central Arabian Sea, keeping an eye on the movement of the Chinese. We had the entire choke points to the entrance, which provide entrance to the Indian Ocean in the east under surveillance, to keep an eye on any Chinese platforms that would seek to venture into the IWAR. Thankfully for them, they did not. And we are stretched. But then the Indian Navy is a mature Navy. We have got our planned preventive maintenance. It is not necessary that we got to put our ships into assisted maintenance periods or into refits. We adopt a philosophy of maintenance on the task when you are mission deployed. Every ship has got multiple systems. We can keep one diesel alternator or one weapon system down and do quick maintenance. All this maintenance, keeping our ships ready at short notice, comes from tremendous amount of confidence and our morale, and our training standards. So we are stretched, no doubt, but we are up to it. And as far as the strength of our platforms is concerned, yes, we would love to have a navy commensurate with our maritime aspirations. We 90% of our trade by by volume comes from the sea. 100% of our energy imports come by sea. Our 5 trillion economy dreams can happen only in case our seas are secure. But as Chanakya in Arthashastra said, Arthaha Muloho Dandaha. And that's also the motto of the Income Tax Department of India. Economy and finance is the foundation of a strong military. And as our economy grows, inshallah, we will have even a stronger navy, thanks to the Atmanirbharta push. I would like to tell your viewers that almost 68% of our orders, our capital budget goes to indigenous domestic industry. And it's only in areas that we don't have the capability, we are forced to look outwards. But that also shall pass. Ye bhi din jayenge, I would say. And thanks to our domestic industry, the MSMEs, the renewed vigor with which we are approaching Atmanirbharta, we will have a navy which will not be stretched. But then every navy is stretched. You look at the China, the most powerful navy in the world, the US Navy, they are stretched. The European navies are stretched. And that's why one of the chief of naval operations about 12 years back from the United States said they're looking at a 1,000-ship navy. Not because the United States can build a 1,000-ship navy, but in partnerships with friendly nations, cooperating, coordinating their patrols, etc., we could bring order to a large swath of the global commons, even if you yourself don't do it. And that's where our partnerships are exercised with foreign navies, or coordinations, or cooperations, initiatives like the IFC IWAR help in to reduce this stretch.
Vice Admiral M.S. Pawar, thank you so much for that extremely comprehensive and wide-ranging interview. I'm sure our viewers will be extremely beholden to you for your experience and your expertise.
Thank you very much, Amitabh. And I must compliment you because the Navy, being a silent service, is often out of the mind of the public. But we require all the good wishes of the public, all the support so that we can get our finances, and all the support from the mothers and fathers in this country, whom I call upon them to send their daughters and sons to join the Indian Navy. It's a beautiful service and one of the best avenues to serve the nation. Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Admiral, and thank you all for watching. Just a reminder, if you want to support StratNews Global, you can do so. There is a link that we put in our YouTube channel, and all through this interview, we are also flashed a UPI ID. There is also another way you can do that. As soon as this stream ends, the premiere of this stream ends, YouTube will put up a heart-shaped icon right next to the thumbs up, which you, I presume, press to like this video, and you can give us a super thanks on that as well. This is the gist on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.